Hey guys, welcome back to the Another Excuse podcast. I'm your host, Byron Greeley, and today's guest is Scott Buell, the founder of Drone Legends. Scott has a really interesting story where he got fed up with the 9 to 5 at the age of 52 and decided to change things and turn things around. He decided to start something on his own, and he gave himself a 6-month ultimatum to do so. He shares some very interesting stories and insights into how he did it, why he did it, and why we are the way we are. It's a very interesting conversation. I learned a lot from it, and it kind of gave me a kick up the ass, to be honest. And I hope it does the same to you. Enjoy the show. Hey Scott, thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited about our conversation. To kick us off, could you explain what your business Drone Legends does and how it all works?
Yeah, so Drone Legends is it's a STEM education program. So we combined the drones, so we bring drones into classrooms, so micro drones. And we've created a curriculum that allows anybody anywhere to run it. My early experiences were that drone technology was really appealing to children. The problem we had is that nobody knew how to actually bring drone programs into schools effectively. It was kind of chaos. So I've used what I call the magic of drones. It's that allure to create a brand around this thing called Drone Legends, which is really based on the foundation that inside every child there's a legend. So in a lot of ways, the drones is a much more a means to an end as it is the be all end all. So we use the shiny object of the drone to captivate children and get them interested. And then we can bring them into our community and start to work with them, not only across STEM disciplines, but I like to think about character development as well. And that's where the inside every child lives a legend comes through, is that's my way of saying unique potential, right? So everybody, all of us have something inside of us that we just have to find. And that's like kind of our special thing.
Amazing. And have you always been involved in education? How did you come up with this idea?
No, in fact, not at all. I was a horrible student. I was a terrible, terrible, terrible student. I was just failing out of school, believe it or not. So I spent probably 25 years in the pharmaceutical industry, working in the life sciences space. I live out here in New Jersey, near Philadelphia area. There's a lot of pharmaceutical activity here. There's companies up and down this. We call it the pharma belt. So when I was coming out of school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I just kind of fell into the life sciences space. And I worked more in the marketing and advertising area of it. I didn't work for a pharmaceutical company. They were my customers, they were my clients. And so I worked for ad agencies and medical communications agencies. And I did that for a long, long time. Picked up a drone as a hobby in like 2020, 15, and became kind of hooked and was doing my work. But around 2019, a lot of things kind of coalesced together where I was like, I want to do something different. A long story in terms of why I felt that way, but it was like, okay, wait a minute, I can actually make a thing with drones. So I opened up a drone business, doing aerial cinematography with like bigger drones and things like that, and just happened to get invited into a classroom to talk to kids about drones, which is when the light bulb kind of went off. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to do a drone business. I'm going to do an education business that uses drones.
I find that so fascinating that you noticed that and decided to pursue it. And so what caused you to notice that opportunity in the education space and decide to pursue that instead of just continuing with your drone business?
Yeah. So we'll get a little kind of deep on this one. So
Please.
I'm 58 years old, right? And so you go back to 2019, I'm 51, 52. I'm having somewhat of an existential crisis in my life. I'm not happy. I'm just for lots of different reasons. I just find myself, well, I'll tell you those reasons. I never started life, even as a young adult, I never had what I call my lighthouse in the distance. And what that means is there was just no direction for me. I was a boat without a rudder and a sail, just being cast around on the ocean. And just sometimes you're going to get washed up on sandy beaches, and other times you might get cast onto sharp, jagged rocks. And I experienced a little bit of both of that. You spend 25 years without purpose, without having some sort of a goal that's pulling you, something that pulls you towards it as opposed to you chasing something. Um, you end up in a pretty weird place, right? I had all the trappings of success. I had a big house, nice cars. From the outside looking in, it looked great. I'd made it. I was successful. Um, Inside, I was dying a slow death, right? The death of a thousand paper cuts, where I just felt like I can't. At 51 years old, I looked up and thought, I don't like where I am. I don't like who I am. I don't like what I'm doing. I was drinking too much. I haven't had a drink in almost 7 years. I was just self-medicating, um, and just wasn't in a good place. And that kind of came to a head around June of 2019, where I found myself just kind of bouncing in and out of different jobs. All of a sudden, now I'm job hopping, looking for something, chasing something, and I don't even know what I'm chasing. So I'm just banging into walls. And one day I just was like, I can't anymore. I just can't. Like if I've got 30, 40 years left in me, God willing, what the hell am I going to do with it? Like, where am I going in my life? What am I doing? Um, when I had that kind of an epiphany, I'd already been about a year no drinking. I just at one point decided that I just didn't want to drink anymore. Alcohol, I'm an obsessive person. I have a very addictive personality. I tend not to do anything gray. It's either all in or all out. And I was all in. And so I just decided at one point just to stop. I just wasn't where I wanted to be. Until a year later, I'm having all these thoughts and I'm thinking to myself, now I've got clarity. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, dude, you're in control of yourself, right? Like you can do whatever you want. You got yourself here. Only you can get yourself out. So what are you going to do? And I thought, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to live like this anymore. So I'm just going to start a drone business. And the only reason I said that is because that's what I did. I was like, I fly drones. All of a sudden, the drone market had become viable. You could go get your FAA Part 107 commercial operator's license, open a small business, and do aerial cinematography. And that's what I did. Um, but now I'm thinking bigger, right? All of a sudden, I'm like free. When I left that kind of world behind me, I was all of a sudden opened up and I'm doing my own thing. And I saw that I could succeed without a big corporation under me. I was like, wait a minute. I'm all right. Maybe I'm not making $1 million a year, but I'm surviving. I'm out here. I'm slowly building something. I spent my entire career in sales. So I certainly know how to go out and promote myself. I've pitched many a big C-suite room in my life. So I can go do this. So if I can do this, what else can I do? And so what happens is you become open to all kinds of opportunities, right? So when you open yourself up like that, things start to find you, right? So I was just moving along. I remember this really clearly. I had all of a sudden had this idea that we would do drones for corporate team building, and I'm bringing drones. And I grabbed one of my old companies. And I was like, "Hey, can I bring you guys into like a turf field and teach you how to fly these little mini drones around? And we'll put you in teams, and you can race and do all kinds of stuff." And they were like, "Yeah." And so I remember packing up, and I borrowed one of my neighbor's kids to help me pack up with my kid. And I had this idea, and I remember I was thinking about this drone club too thing because I had kind of been teasing this idea around. And he goes, "You know what I think, Scott?" He goes, he's a smart guy. And I was like, he goes, "I think you're going to bounce into a lot of things. You're going to try a lot of things. And one of them's going to stick." And he was right, right? I was open to trying anything. I was like, because I know I'm not going back, right? I burned the proverbial boats, right? I was just like, I was not ever going back there. In my opinion, I'd rather die than go back. So I thought, like, let's just go forward and see what I can do. So I tried everything. It's like when you're a football player and the running back, they always tell you to pump your legs. No matter how many people are on you, just keep the knees high and pump the legs. I think that's like life if you're trying to accomplish anything. You're going to bang into walls. You're going to hit 250-pound linebackers. But if you keep chugging your legs, you're going to get those extra yards. They're hard earned yards, but maybe they were just inches too, but every one counts. And so I just kept pumping my legs.
Yeah, that's a really great story. And there's so much to unpack there. But I'm curious. This may be a difficult question to answer, but why do you think you sort of put up with your previous state of being up until you were in your early 50s? Because I think a lot of people sort of just coast through life that way,
Mm-hmm.
and some don't even come to the realization that you came to, and they just sort of finish life going through the motions. And why do you think that is sort of our natural state, or a lot of people's natural state?
I think because people are afraid. I think we've been taught that failing is bad. I think if you look at the school system, the way it's set up, it's, red ink on paper and you failed, you pass or you fail. When failing's part of life, that's how you learn. So I think a few things. I think people are afraid to put themselves out. They're afraid of what people will say. So, as soon as you give people that kind of power over you, you're powerless. Um, they don't want to fail. We've and I'm just going to go back to my own personal, and I think a lot of us just kind of move through life blindly. I think you have to get really clear on what it is that you want out of your life. This is a hard question to answer, so I want to try to be real mindful about how I answer it because I got a lot of thoughts on this, and I want to. There's a few things going on at once, right? I think that all right. So let's break it down. So how do a lot of us go through life and wake up? I mean, most of us wake up in our old age with full of regret, right? I've watched in just the past 6 months. I'm watching my mother age. I watched my stepfather just pass away, completely a broken soul, sad, real sad. And you're like, how do people get there? I think we're conditioned to get there. When you think of yourself as a child, you dream, right? You can be anything. The world is open to you. The world is just this magnificent, amazing place. Everything is new. Everything's interesting. Everything's shiny. You're learning. You love to learn because that's all you have. You're an empty vessel and you're just kind of learning and learning. And you get into things and you find things that you love to do. You spend hours maybe drawing or building something and you lose track of time or you're playing with your and that's such a great time in life. And we lose that as we get older. The system beats it out of us is grow up. What are you going to do? Get a job, go to college. It's this track, right? That we've been taught to believe is the pathway. And maybe in the 50s and the 60s and even in the 70s and maybe even pushing the days, that was maybe real. Maybe that made a difference because you didn't have the opportunity you have today. I mean, this is the giant leveler. I
Yeah,
could never have done with Drone Legends 20 years ago. I couldn't do. None of us could, but now everybody can. So let's go back to the question. So I think we get it beaten out of us. I think family, friends, society, the system builds into you. Don't fail. Think about how school teaches you to learn how to take tests. It's not how to think outside the box. It's actually the opposite. It's how to think inside the box. The school system was designed to create compliant workers, right? Toe the
yeah,
line. Don't do out here. Don't be out here. Be inside that box. And so we all come through that system. I mean, especially here in the US, it's how it works, right? We come through that educational system being taught, unless you have some really excellent teachers. And I got sent away to a school in Maine in my high schools, and we can talk about that. That was a character education school that changed me in a lot of ways for good, saved my ass, so to speak. It just saved me. But so we come through that. So we grow up in fear. We grow up that if we don't do what's kind of the expected thing, the pathway, that we're going to be ridiculed or that we could fail and we're going to look like fools and we don't. And we've forgotten all the dreams of youth. And we just blindly go through as if this is it. Think how fast the months, the days, weeks, months, and years blur by, especially as you get older. You can think about a friend who you maybe haven't talked to in a while, and you'll go, God, man, it's been 2 years since I've even said, or 6 months, and then you say, well, let's not let 6 months go by again before we reconnect. And next thing you know, it's a year. And I think that happens to all of us. And we're not intentional about what we want to be doing. So, if you find yourself in that position at any age, here's the deal. You're here for one time. And I realized this as I was being berated by some guy at my last job who had no business berating me. He was a crazy person. And I just remember sitting there thinking, this is no way to live. Like this is your life. I'm going to get really deep for a minute, but you get one shot. There's a great book called Life in Half a Second. Everybody ought to read it because it just breaks it down. It's most basic. It's you shouldn't be alive. The odds of you existing are like zero, 400 trillion to one. And then in the grand scheme of things, you get like half a second to live it. So
yeah,
why are you going to do it doing crap you don't like to do, working for people you don't want to be around, toeing the line, coming home miserable? I mean, most people get home, crack open a drink, And then they do that every night. And then they wake up, they rinse, repeat. Weekends come, they live for Fridays, they dread Mondays. And then it's go review the cycle. Before you know it, a year's gone by, 5 years, 10 years. And then you're 50. And now you're really in a pickle because you've got maybe you've been some success in like corporate. Maybe you're making, I don't know, 150, 200,000 a year, which isn't a whole hell of a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. It's a lot to a lot of people, but if you're making 200 and you're living up to 200, you're broke. So, and a lot of people here in America live like that, right? I make 200,000 a year. Yeah, but you spend 200,000 a year on everything that's now you've built a prison around you. And that was me, 100%. I was like, look, I've made it. Here's my shiny Beamer. Here's my big, beautiful house. Here's all my nice clothes. Look at all my cool gadgets. And I was one step away from homelessness if I didn't keep working at jobs that I hated, right? So I was trapped and I was like, oh no, can't do this anymore. So I hope I've answered the question in a kind of a rambly sort of way, but I think we're scared. We've been taught that that's the way it is. We then go through that system and we build these self-imposed prisons around ourselves. And when you reach 50 years old, the thought of restarting, oh no, I can't go out on my own. I've got a mortgage. I've got kids going to college. I've got, my bills are like $150,000 a year. How in the world am I going to start something on my own? And so you don't, and you just accept it. And that's when you start drinking. And that's when you start and then you kind of plod through life miserable. Maybe not 100% miserable. I know for me, I was. I can't speak for everybody. That was my experience.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you just said. And I'm curious, is Drone Legends a way at sort of countering the current education system? Or would you agree with that statement?
I think I wouldn't say countering. I'd say it's a complement to what kids are learning in classrooms. So we try to bring kids into this environment where they're learning through iteration. We teach them, first off, we talk about this inside, be legendary, which is, I want every kid to see, I want kids to not lose the dream.
Yeah.
I want them to continue to be kids as they get older and chase. I don't like to use the word chase your passion. What I like to do is I keep telling my 18-year-old son this, find what you like to do and that you're relatively good at, and then hone that skill and figure out a way to monetize it. You'll be fine. You won't really ever feel like you're working. So I want kids to feel that. So are we challenging the current system? No, we're working within it. We supplement it, right? The big thing about our company is we work for the teachers. Right. Because the one thing that I've experienced over the last 4 years, having just come into this educational system as a noob, is a newfound respect for teachers, because they're on the front lines and they oftentimes, they too have to work within the system's confines. But if you ask, and I ask it all the time, I've met with hundreds and hundreds of teachers over the last 4 to 5 years. And I always ask them, why'd you get into teaching? And it's always the same answer, because I wanted to make a difference. And so that means that, yes, they have to work within the confines. But like I said, I think I said it in the beginning of this, I think all of us can remember a special teacher, that one person out of the many that sparked you, that you really got into, that you saw in them something that you aspired to be, or they taught you to think differently. And so my hat's off to teachers. And so our system is designed so that teachers can use it to help them achieve their mission of helping students realize their inner legends.
You spoke about like the sort of financial prison that people get themselves into, even if you are earning 200 grand a year.
Yeah.
But I'm curious how you took the steps to get out of that financial prison, because like you said, you could be on the street if you don't get the next paycheck. Yeah. So how did you take those small steps into working in your own business?
Risk. I did a big gamble. I took some money out of my accounts and said to my wife, she saw how miserable I was, and to her credit, she trusted me. I said, look, I'm going to take this chunk of money and this gives me a 6-month runway. And at the end of this, if I don't feel like I'm making progress, I'll go find a job. Behind that, it wasn't as if it was this overnight pivot either. I had started to I'm a sales and marketing guy. I tend to be somewhat creative. I'd been, hey, can I help you with your social media? Can I do this? Can I do that? I had started to kind of moonlight or side hustle. There's always a side hustle. Here's the thing: we waste a whole lot of time. There's 24 hours in a day. You need to sleep 8 if you're really good. Most of us don't. Most of us sleep 6, 7. But if you're really truly not where you want to be and you come home at night and you sit on the sofa and watch Netflix or the nightly news and you drink a beer and you're hanging out, then that's your fault. That's your problem. I have very little sympathy for that. If you really want to get out of your situation, then start side hustling. Start figuring out a way to do the thing that you like to do. What is it that you would do? If you couldn't fail, what would you do? And then try that. Like if the odds of you failing were 0, what would you be doing other than what you're currently doing? If like literally somebody looked at you and said, dude, you could not fail if you tried it, what would you do? So, okay, so look at that and go, okay, that's your thing. That's what you'd rather be doing. What would you rather be doing? Remember that old Monty Python sketch?
Yeah.
Marching up and down the square. What would you rather be doing? I'd rather be home reading a book with, okay, great, go. Oh, good, off you go. But what would you rather be doing? And then figure out, can you side hustle that for a little while? And so, you get up, I get up at 4. I'm crazy. I get up at 4 a.m. and I typically go to bed around 9:30, 10. And I will tell you that with very little exception, I work that time. And people will be probably listening to that and go, well, I don't want that life. That's okay. That's okay. But don't complain about the one you have. You can't have both. You can't do both. If you don't want to put in the time, so you could come home from your work and you could have a dinner and you could spend a little bit of time with your husband or kids. And then you could say at 8 o'clock, guess what? I'm going to go work for 3 hours. And you go up on the computer, you put some headphones on and you do the job that you'd rather be doing. And you figure out or you read business books or you listen to really cool motivational podcasts instead of watching the stinking news. But I got to be informed. Do you really? Do you really need to sit and put all that poison inside your head every night? Because that's what's making you miserable too. So my way of saying is, what would you do with self-imposed prison? Well, you got yourself there. You can get yourself out. I got rid of my BMW. I went on swap a lease. And I bought my stepfather's 2007 Buick Lucerne off of him for $1 because he couldn't drive anymore. He was like 80 something years old. And he was like, I don't drive, you want? I said, I'll take it for $1. So I took the title and I got out of my $750 a month BMW lease. And I had a no payment car payment right away. I'd save myself. Now, it doesn't mean someone's going to hand you $1 car, but you could go buy a Toyota Corolla used. But no, you got to drive your Beamer. You got to drive your Mercedes, right? How many times a week you going out to dinner?
Yeah.
How many times a day you buying lunch? That's all wasted money, man. You can do it. You could save hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month by just changing some of your lifestyle. So I'd ask people that think they're really miserable to look at what they're actually doing in their day-to-day lives and start to hold themselves accountable. Because it's easy to bitch. It's really easy to complain, right? It's hard to actually do something about it. I say it, but it isn't. It's this, that's the expression? The longest time is the time between a thought and action.
Yeah.
Dude, just do it. So many people overanalyze stuff. It's just start. It's going to suck in the beginning. You're going to flounder around in the beginning. But if you just get started, sometimes it's simple as just putting your name at the top of the paper. Right? Like the test. Remember you had to write something? It's like, I don't even know where to start. Start. Just start. Put the pen to the paper and make sure you see some ink on the paper. Remember the chugging of the feet? You might just get inches. But all right, those will turn into yards eventually. So, yeah, I think what I would say to people is assess where you are. What would you rather be doing? If you couldn't fail, what is it that you would do? And then, okay, look at that and go, okay, wait a minute. What are you doing after work? So what do you do before work and what do you do after work? Right? Because if you're waking up at 7 to run into the office at 8, or you're getting online, worse yet, you work from home and you're getting up at 8 to be on a Zoom at 9. Your hair's all twisted up. I see people like that all the time. Could you get up at 5 and work for 2 hours? Could you go to bed? Could you cut after dinner? Could you go and spend another 2 hours working? There's 4 hours I found you right there.
Yeah.
That you could be studying. You could take a course online My God, the amount of courses Google offers for free. You can
Yeah,
learn from the masters now. So no excuses. I have very little sympathy for people that complain but then do nothing about it. Sounds
yeah.
rough, but you know what? That's kind of how I feel.
No, I agree. It's all depends on how bad you want it, and whether you
Yeah,
just want to complain about it or actually do something about it because you have all
do
the
something about it.
resources.
That's right.
And
That's right.
and speaking of resources, you touched on them a bit in your answer, but I'm curious, during that transitionary period, what sort of resources did you turn to that like kept you motivated and kept you
hmm
going?
So I immediately so okay. So I immediately cut alcohol out of my life, which was a non-resource, not a resource. But then I vowed off. I'm an avid reader. I love to read, but I love to read science fiction and things like that. I read anything, but I was really into the science fiction genre my whole life. I just vowed off of that. I said no more. If I'm going to read, I will no longer. Here's the thing. It's also about what you're not going to do. So I'm no longer going to read pleasure books. I'm no longer gonna watch the news. I cut off the news. I said no more news. I try to avoid it on my. I listen. I look at TikTok like anybody else, but I try to train the algorithm to not feed me the garbage. Right. I try to look at
Yeah.
dog videos and stuff like that, or motivational stuff, which gets you to the other point. What am I going to consume? I'm going to consume. So Gary Vee was in my head early on. Even in my 20s, I remember Awaken the Giant Within. I had the tapes.
Hmm.
Tony Robbins. I had the
Yeah.
cassette tapes,
Yeah.
man. Right. So I love that stuff. I work out to I go on YouTube and I get those motivational, Eric E or whatever, and I get the guys that are yelling in your ear like, you're better than this, and
I think that.
and Les Brown and Eddie Pinero, and I lift to that stuff. So I lift to stuff like I listen to motivational stuff, but I also listen to a lot of business stuff. So I listen to the My First Million podcast. I listen to How I Built This by Guy Raz, Leaders from the Top or Wisdom from the Top. Um, I read books on business. So Good to Great by Jim Collins. I loved Build by Tony Fadell, the guy behind the iPhone design and the Nest thermostat. Great book, awesome book. Life in Half a Second, inspirational life books. It's not all self help. At some point, you got to get off the self help and into what's gonna get you to the next. If you need self help in the beginning, that's great, but it all starts to become redundant, right? It's all the same thing.
Yeah.
Pick yourself up, you hold yourself accountable, uh, fail forward, fail often. It's the same stuff. It's the resonant themes, right? You got to hear that enough. And every now and then I'll kick that stuff back on just to get a little booster. But ultimately it's listening to books that are going to help you perfect your craft. And in my opinion, I'm an entrepreneur first. So how do I build and scale and provide the best value? I want to build an enduring brand. I'm not interested in a lifestyle brand. I'm interested in Drone Legends becoming, and all of my brands, the Little Legends, Drone Legends, and everything that's in that DL universe we're creating. This Rise of the Legends novel, the whole Drone Legends universe. I want that to be epic. I want that to be big. I want it to be held up like here, like it means something, like the Pixar of edutainment. And why not me? That's how I look at it. So I listen to and seek out content that's going to teach me. And then I try to apply it. A lot of people just read. You have to
Yeah.
apply. Knowledge without application is useless.
Yeah. Definitely. And um, part of that consumption, I know in our previous conversation, you brought up quite a few quotes, and I was surprised at how many quotes like you could recall. And
Yeah.
um, I was just curious, why is collecting quotes important to you?
Because I'll hear something, and we all have this experience, I'm sure. You hear something and you're like, oh, that struck a nerve in me. Right. And so I started just opening my notes app and I'll pull over. If I'm listening to a podcast, I will literally pull over, pause the podcast, rewind it and go, what was that again that he just said? I love that. Or I'll highlight something in a book and I'll be like, I got to remember that. I got to remember that. Or I'm listening to a podcast in the morning, I'm rowing or working. I'll stop and I'll just quickly put it in my notes thing so I can go back and look at them. And because they, you know, if they meant enough to me in that moment to where I was like, ooh, that's cool. I love what that person just said. then I want to capture that. I don't want to lose it, because a lot of times we let that go. We think for a minute, that was really cool. And then, you're off to the next thing instead of capturing it. And so I started making this habit of capturing those quotes so I could go back and look at them.
Yeah, it's really cool. I also do it in a way where I collect more ideas, and
Mm-hmm.
I started my newsletter for that very purpose. So it wasn't really to create the newsletter or to get a whole lot of followers. It was to force myself to actively listen, so I had ideas to write about and unpack those
Mm-hmm.
ideas and learn more about them.
Yeah.
And so I do the same. If I hear something, I'll rewind and write in my
Yeah.
notes app,
Yeah.
and then go
That's
back to
great.
it and try explain the concept or idea.
I love it, and I share it with people, so it's a shared. I think I've shared it with like 5 people right now where they can add to it, and it's become this kind of shared notes thing that I love it. I'll look back, and I like what other people put in here too. I'm like, "Oh, that was a cool one. I didn't see that one coming." So, it's a shared notes thing. I just share it with people.
Awesome.
It's
And
fun. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
yeah. And even while you're consuming all this content, and it's all like go out and get it and practical lessons,
Mhm.
but a lot of people may still struggle to apply it because they have some sort of negative self-talk. And I know that you've
Mhm.
mentioned before that like positive self-talk is really important. And I'd love to
Mhm.
hear you explain why you think that.
Yeah, it is, and again, I train yourself. Here's the thing: if you don't talk great about yourself, who's going to? You know, we're our own worst enemies, aren't we? We tend to be our own biggest critics, and not in a good way. Holding yourself accountable is different than criticizing yourself. You know, you're like, "Oh, Scott, you dummy! Why did you do that again?" Or no, it's just think of your subconscious, your brain, like a fertile landscape, like a fertile field. It'll whatever you feed it, it will produce. I'm very, very big on this. I'm huge on this, because and that's why I don't consume negative stuff. That's why I stay away from negative people. I cut them out of my life. That's why I put myself a lot out on social. And if you get every now and then you get a troll that'll say something, yeah, most people don't. I mean, if I'm going to spend my time worried about this one person thought, then like what did Gary Vee say the other day? If you're going out with Johnny Underpants 69, and with like 3 followers said about you, then his is the life that's a problem, not yours. Um, I talk to myself very positive. I write. I'm a avid writer. I write in my journal every day. I write about this what I want to achieve in life, how things are going, how I think that I can. I always lead with this question. Here's the question. A lot of people lead and they go, "Man, why not me?" And
Hmm.
I just changed the inflection on why not me. Like, dude, somebody's going to do things. Why not me? Why not you? And that's the thing. I think we all have this negative talk in our minds. You got to be aware of it. Be hyper aware of it. So my morning routines are really weird, right? There's a quote I have: "If I can control my morning, I can control my day." Is that what I wrote? Yeah, it's something like that, right? If I can control my morning, so I get up very early, and I have a very, very intentional routine in the morning of writing. And I don't journal to be like journaling. I just like to write. It just gets my thoughts out on paper, and then as I drive to the gym in the morning, I literally talk to myself out loud,
Oh,
like,
wow.
you don't want to know what I say, but it's, I pump myself up. I'm like, dude, you've got this. Like, you are this. And I say it in the present tense, because no matter what you sow in that field will grow. So if you sow arsenic, you'll grow arsenic plants. If you sow roses, you'll grow roses. So plant the roses. Whatever you put in your head, you are what you think about. You become what you think about. You got to think about yourself. You are be the hero in your own story. I mean, Joe Rogan or somebody said this. I mean, and it's so true. Think about your life. It's your life. Don't you get to write the script? Don't let anybody else write it for you. Be the hero in your story. Well, we love the hero story. The hero's the underdog, right? The hero's journey is it's in every movie. Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, Rocky. I mean, we love the underdog. So be the underdog. If you feel like the underdog right now, what is it that you need to overcome? What's your hero's journey? Right? And paint that picture in your head. You can write the script for your life. It's the greatest thing about being a human being and not a dog, is
Yeah.
that we can actually create what we think about. right? No other thing can do that. Nothing can say, I want to build this, and then we build it, or a railroad, or a spacecraft, or a wheel, or whatever it is. Humans are the only thing. If you look around the room that you're in right now, every single thing in front of you was once a thought. And so that's all it is. And you make your thoughts real and you become what you think about. So stop thinking about yourself in the negative. Start thinking about yourself in the positive. If you don't love yourself, nobody else is going to. If you're looking for outside people to tell you you're great, you're going to fail. You're going to have a rough life. If you're seeking outside accolades to tell you you're great, nobody's going to, because everybody's got their own problems. Earn it. Let them tell. You know when they'll start to tell you you're great? When you start to become great. When you start to do things that are extraordinary, that the regular person, the average person is like, because I remember when I first started. Oh, Scott's doing his little thing again. Isn't that cute? They don't say that anymore. You know what they say
Yeah.
now? Dude, I'm envious of you, man. I'm still working for the man over here. How did you do it? What did you do? I'm impressed. How in the world did you do this? This is so amazing. I'm so impressed with you. And that's great. I love the fact that they think that way, but it's okay. I just go, you know what? Because I tried. Because I wouldn't quit. I never let failure wasn't an option for me. And I was very intentional about what I wanted, why I wanted it is even more important, and that I like myself. It's fine to like yourself. You should. I like,
Yeah.
yeah, I do like myself. I didn't like myself 7, 8 years ago. I hated myself. Thought I couldn't look in the mirror. I was not a good person.
Yeah. That's awesome. And you mentioned that you were positive and you had resilience, and a lot of people admire those qualities, and you attribute that to your success. Did urgency play a role in you making progress at all?
Yes, I think it goes back to the old expression of burn the boats, right? If you don't
Yeah.
have a plan B, like I said, I gave myself 6 months runway. I took out an IRA. I said to my wife, I'm going to take out this IRA, and I promise you that if I don't have something going, and what was it? I didn't know exactly what that meant, but in the moment, is if we don't feel like we're making progress, she let she let me do it. You know what I mean? I could have done
Yeah.
it, but my wife's really cool, and she said, I'm with you. And so, yeah, it was urgent, and I think I still wake up with a sense of urgency. I tell my staff this all the time: if you don't wake up with butterflies in your stomach, there's something missing. And they're not scared butterflies. It's like I used to sing in a band, right? Years ago. I had
Yeah.
the hair and the makeup and the whole thing. Don't ask. And but I remember before you go out on stage, you'd have the butterflies. But they were awesome butterflies. Right? Like sometimes I speak in front of large groups of people. Or I used to go pitch I'd go up to Pfizer in New York and I'd pitch in front of a C-suite. Yeah, you sweat and the palms are going a little bit. But and I feel it. That's what wakes me up at 4 a.m. Not the alarm. My desire, that desire to succeed, that fear of, in a good way, that fear of going back to that, which I didn't want to do. I'll never go back. And as the years stretch on, I couldn't imagine ever having to go back into that world. So yes, in the beginning, I think you always have to have urgency. Bezos has the famous quote, it's always day one.
Yeah, that's really important to remember. And do you think it's important to manufacture that sort of urgency like you did? Well, you didn't really manufacture it. It was just the reality where you took a step from your job and you were like, I've got 6 months to do it. Do
Mm-hmm.
you think, because I've spoken to a lot of founders where their situations are similar, or there's different variations of that situation where they were backed into a corner, they hit rock bottom. There's multiple versions of it, but they had that urgency. And do you think that's a necessity, or do you think it's possible to be successful without that urgency? It might just take a different approach.
I think it varies on your age too. I have an 18-year-old son, and he's got time. He doesn't need
Right.
that urgency. He doesn't have to have that burning urgency. What he needs to do is take his time to explore. He's 18. He's got a whole life ahead of him. So don't rush into, I have to do this. I have to do that. I need to find out what I'm going to do for a living. No, you don't. You really don't. You need to be open to learning what it is you're going to do for a living. So I think at a younger age, you're in your 18, you're 20, you you got time, right? We're living longer. I'm 58. And if you look at me, I'm not saying this but think about what 58 looked like 50 years ago.
Yeah.
People were freaking old, right? We were old at 58. 58's the new 38. We live a lot longer. We look younger longer. We feel younger longer. So at 18 years old, you're not even starting yet. So the urgency doesn't need to be there. I think the discipline, in a way, I like to treat my son, I like to teach him to kind of have a self accountability. You're accountable for exploring. Get out of your room, go do some things, right? Go try different kinds of jobs, work for different kinds of people, be open to exploring. If you're 50, yeah, there's urgency. If you want to start something at 50, then you should be hell bent on it. You need to be 100% dialed in on why it is you're doing it, what it is you're going to do, and then go after it like you're on fire. Because you don't have all the time in the world. The odd thing about being 50 is you still probably have 30 years, 40 years if you're going to be 90. Think about it. That's a long time. But we know at 50 how fast 30 years goes by, right?
Yeah.
Like you were just 20. I was just 20. I was just 28. I can't believe I'm 58. I'm just 28, right? So, but if you stop and think about all that happened in that time, yeah, you've got time. You shouldn't panic. I guess the thing is, you shouldn't panic. It's a weird thing. You've got time, but you don't have time. The sands in the hourglass are running thin, and so no time like the present to get started. Okay?
Yeah.
There's not always tomorrow. You get started today, and you then think about it. If I've got 30 years left, what can I accomplish in 10? What can I achieve in 5 to 7? Okay. Well, in 5 to 7, it's 7 years. I'm 65. All right. Well, what if I've sold my business by then and I'm sitting on a lot can happen. And then I'm 65. And even at 65, I would go, well, what would I do? My wife's like, what if you sold your business at like 65? I go, I would want to work because what else am I going to do? Right.
Yeah.
I like what I do. I really enjoy what I do. So I think you have to put the urgency on. I think it varies on your age.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I've heard you describe business as an intellectual sport. Do you think that it's important to view business through a competitive lens?
100%. 100%. If you don't, then then get out of business.
Yeah.
It's an intellectual sport, and someone's always coming to eat your lunch. Someone's going to be better. Someone's going to work harder. Someone's going to think smarter. Someone's going to be more strategic. Someone's going to put the time in to learn. Someone's going to understand your market better than you. Or if you've created the market, someone's going to come after it because they see the opportunity. It is a sport. It's just like any sport, and it's very competitive. Now, it doesn't mean that you focus on like a runner. You don't look behind you.
Yeah.
You run forward. You can't constantly have your head over your shoulder worrying about what the competition's doing. You need to always be thinking about how do I have a little thing on my wall here. It says it's not about who's first, it's about who does it best. And the best is the business that delivers the most value to the consumer. So keep asking yourself, how can I make the best product possible? How can I keep improving my services? So you got to focus on you. It's like training for a sport. You don't watch what your competition's doing to train. You do you. You get in the gym and you put in the reps and you're shooting the hoops and you're doing whatever it is, or chess. You're spending the hours working. Just get good, so that you are competitively better than the competition, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That does make
Yeah.
sense. And you could argue that some people aren't cut out for that. That's too much risk. That's too scary. And so they'd prefer to just work a 9 to 5. And that's also okay.
It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I think self-awareness is huge.
Yeah.
You got to understand what makes you tick and what you want to do. Here's what I think is where people get stuck. is if you want to work a 9 to 5, if you want to punch a clock, be realistic about the lifestyle you can actually live.
Yeah.
Live below your means. A lot of happy people making 75, 85, $100,000 a year, but they're driving a Toyota that's paid off. They've been driving it for 10 years. They don't go out to dinner maybe once a month. They pack lunch.
Yeah.
They they wear their clothes longer. Um, they do things. They live below their means. They don't get into debt. But if you want to go punch a clock, but you're spending all the money, you're trying to live the lifestyle. So you got to live the lifestyle of a 9 to 5 that makes $100,000 a year, not an entrepreneur that's making. Quite frankly, most entrepreneurs don't make a lot of money for a long, long time, and they're willing to sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right? I make lots less now than I made during the peak of my corporate gigs. Probably $100,000 less.
Well,
A lot, but I've never been happier
yeah.
because I cut out all the other stuff. I cut it all out
Yeah.
just
That's
so I
awesome.
could I tore down my wall. So you got to be realistic.
Yeah.
You got to be real, look yourself in the mirror and be honest with yourself. Like, what do you want to do? Why? And you know, self-awareness is huge.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned that you've been sober for, was it 8 years? Or no, 11?
I'm going into my 7th year.
7th year.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been sober for 4.5 years, and I'm
Okay.
curious.
Wow.
Uh,
Okay.
you
Good.
did attribute some of those big decisions to being sober and having that mental clarity, but I'd just
Mm-hmm.
like you to go into a bit more detail of how important it was to you going sober.
100%. I couldn't be here today if I were still drinking. There's just no way. Just absolutely no way. I I I don't begrudge anybody for drinking. I couldn't handle it.
Me too.
Period. There's many people that I know that can have a cocktail, one, and they're done, and they may not have another one for 2 weeks. They don't think about it. It's never on their mind. It's as out there as I had a hamburger last week. You know what I mean? Like they don't think about it. It's not on their mind. Mine was every day. The weekends were insane. It consumed me. It, it was everything revolved around it. And the one thing that I will say about I love some people are so afraid of becoming sober because it's so widely it's a social thing in our society right now as everybody drinks and people go out to drink and it's social and I wear my sobriety like a badge. It's one of these things where I actually feel I know when I'm in a group and I'm like, nah, I don't drink. I go, me and alcohol have we don't get along. You say it tongue in cheek, people get the meaning and they
Yeah.
respect you. I have so much respect from people. Envy. I've got people that really envy it. They're like, oh man, I wish I could do that. You know what I mean? They know it. Even if you're not a full-blown raging alcoholic, there's a lot of functional alcoholics walking around out there. We kid ourselves. Society has made wine so acceptable. I just come home and I have a glass or two of wine a night. Well, if that's every night, right? And then what are you doing on the weekends? Don't kid yourself. But I'm not here to judge anybody. You do you. Be you. Do you. For me, the clarity, the absolute superpower that I feel sober, I feel invincible. I feel like I was injected with something awesome. Like it's hard to explain. Maybe you'll understand this. A lot of alcoholics feel this way, especially those of us that were functional. Because I was functional. I wasn't laying in a ditch. I didn't lose my house. I was functional, but I knew that it didn't end well. But when you stop, all of a sudden your brain starts to unfog.
Yep.
And I don't know if this was your experience, but you start to get this clarity and you start to feel elevated in a weird way. You start to feel like, my God, because we're addictive people. Here's the crazy thing about alcohol addiction and any addiction, but particularly if you can get off of like a functional alcoholism kick, that addictive quality in you is still there. It doesn't go away. So where are you going to put it? Right? Like you can outlast people. You can outpace the non-addict because you've got something they don't have, an obsessive personality. And I'll tell you, agree or disagree, it takes an obsessive personality to achieve successful entrepreneurship. You got to be in, right? You can't be half in. You can't be gray. You got to be all in. Or you can be, but just know what you're going to have. You might have a little lifestyle brand, and that's cool. But man, if you really want to go after it, the people that get sober get like this massive dose of accelerant, right? At least that's how I felt. And the more that early clarity was like, oh my gosh, there's nothing I can't do. Like, oh my God, the amount of time I wasted sitting in a bottle, I'll just put that over here. Thank you. And I'm off. That's why I can get up at 4. That's why I can do that, because I'm just wired differently. It's the addictive person in me is wired that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. I don't miss it, not even a little bit. I've met alcoholics that miss it, not even a smidgen. I love being sober.
I'm the same. I couldn't believe the noticeable difference in my mental clarity when I hit the 3-month mark and the 6th
Yeah.
month mark were like 2 huge milestones for me where I felt like completely different. And I almost wish I could feel that feeling again, because now that's just like my current state. But I couldn't believe how noticeable the difference was when I
And
hit that
physically
3 month.
too, your
Yeah,
face changes. You look good. I mean, I remember people looking at me 3 months later that hadn't seen me in a while, like, what are you doing? Like, you look
yeah,
great. You glow, right? Because you're ruddy and puffy. When you're drinking like that, it just it's poison. So your skin's kind of ruddy. Your hair looks kind of, your eyes are droopy. It ages you. It puffs you out. You get the alcohol bloat, we call it. You stop that within 3 weeks. I looked significantly different. Just
yeah.
boom, I felt it. My clothes felt different. I felt different. Everything about my physique felt different. My face narrowed out. I was not puffy anymore. I used to get like this rosacea kind of deal thing, and I would go
Oh
to
yeah,
like dermatologists and things like this. And as soon as I stopped drinking, all that went away. All of it.
yeah.
Oh, I used to turn purple when I drank. I used to get that hot flash. My whole face would turn like red, beet red, like like this little puppet back on Mr. Rogers. Remember her with the rosacea face? It was like bad. I had rosacea really bad, and as soon as I stopped drinking, it went away.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'd recommend everyone just give it a try and see what
I
happens.
I do too. I'm right there with you. I'd say, look, man, try to go 3. If you can't go 3 weeks without drinking, then you have a problem.
Yeah,
Try going even a week. Give it 1 week. Don't even have a drink for 1 week and see how different you feel.
definitely.
Awesome. Yep.
And last time we spoke, you'd gone viral on TikTok with a few videos of your dog, and you were
Yeah.
grappling with how to approach capitalizing on the
Yeah.
attention. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, how have things gone so far?
Yeah, that's the greatest thing, right? So I spent 4.5 years building Drone Legends, which is a significant brand. It's not like nobody knows us out there. We're well entrenched around the country and in locations around the world. But here I post this. And it's funny. I was listening to Gary Vee and I was reading his latest book, Day Trading Attention. And I was like, it's social content. And the algorithms are different today, right? So it's no longer about followers. We still have our followers, and that's a vanity metric at this point in time. It's algorithm and what it picks up and it feeds people. It's he calls it the TikTokification of social media. And it's all over now. Facebook, Instagram, they're all like this now. They feed you, the algorithm sees what you think, what it thinks you want based on your consumption preferences, and feeds you more of that. And so
Yeah,
that actually levels the playing field. You can have 500,000 visitors or followers, and I could have 40, and I could have a video go viral. So I looked at my wife and son. My dog was acting really crazy. He was obsessed with a sump pump. I have a finished basement, and in the corners of our basement are sump pumps. And sump pumps, if you don't know, if you come from a place where you don't have basements, they're like 3-foot deep wells in the ground, and a French drain around the perimeter of your base foundation drains groundwater into these things, and it's like the reverse of a toilet flushing mechanism. There's a floater ball. Instead of when it gets to a certain height, it triggers a pump that sucks the water out and expels the water out into the ground again, right? So it just keeps your basement dry if there's any flooding, if it should rain. It's a sump pump. And my dog would start literally over 6 months going ballistic every time I even walked up to the top of our basement, which is open. We have an open floor plan. There's no door. And he would attack me going downstairs. He would get nuts. Nuts. Just Google Puggle basement and you'll find it. Puggle basement. It went completely nuts. And so and he would scrape the door to this sump pump, and I took the lid off this thing, and I'm like, what is in here? I'm shining flashlights. There's nothing in there. I could see the water is only this deep in the bottom of it. But in the video, it looks like this gaping pit to like hell. It's just funny, right? So it had all the trappings of like a mystery suspense. There's a crazy dog, and there's this, you open the door, and it's like, oh, I saw one girl on a podcast. As soon as I opened the door and she saw the sump pump hole, she goes, oh, hell no. Like, it just looks like this evil, evil thing. And the dog's legitimately going insane, going psycho. So I filmed this and I posted to TikTok. And this was 3 weeks ago. And within 2 days, my phone started blowing up. And I literally had like 40 followers on TikTok 3 weeks ago. Today, there's almost 24,000. And I've got, that video is 9.4 million views so far. Like, hundreds of thousands of comments and shares. Newsweek called me and they picked it up. These two girls on this famous podcast were talking about it. It's made the rounds, and we've since kept it going. And yeah, the entrepreneur in me was like, oh, like I've got 300 followers on TikTok for Drone Legends or something like this. I'm like, what do I do with this? And I did. Look, I couldn't help it. I said to my business partner, I said, all right, I'm going to check out a little bit for just a little bit. Trust me, I'm not losing focus, but I got to go over here and I got to figure this out because this is really cool. And we did. We created something called Team Tucker, and my dog's name is Tucker. And I started, the brander in me started to build a brand around this. I have access to some resources. So, I have a full development team, right? I have artists and writers and content creators. So I said to one of my artists, I said, hey, create this logo. Here's a picture of my dog and my other dog that are like Ruby and Tucker. And he created this great Team Tucker logo. And I started to create a story around it. Anyway, long story is we are going to try to do something, right? My wife's always wanted to work with dog shelters. Our dogs are rescues. We don't buy, we adopt. And so she's always said, I'd love to get into the working with dogs and things like that one day. That would be her. If I couldn't fail, what would you do? But she's not wired like that. That's what she would do. And so I was like, well, look, what if I can build this up to, what if we could take Team Tucker and turn it into, because I don't know what I'm going to do with the platform now. The story kind of ran its pace, right? I did radon. Everybody was like, it's either radon, haunted spirits, or the water pump, or you've got rodents in there, or whatever. And it turns out my dog's ball obsessed, and it's the smell of his favorite. We have to hide his favorite ball in a cabinet because he goes nuts over it. It's one ball, and he just goes absolutely ballistic over this ball. So we have to put it away. And the guy that finally came in and figured it out, this dog behaviorist and trainer, said, I said, because he's never seen it. The pump's been on. Why is he going nuts for this? The lid's been on, the door's been shut. He goes, how long has he had that ball? I said, because his dog's been here like 2 years and he's never once been, now all of a sudden he's interested in this thing. I said, oh, about 6 months. He goes, yeah, at the same time he started going nuts for this basement. Smell. My dog's half beagle. He said, this guy worked with canine bomb dogs. And he said, even if there's a fragment of material in that plastic that's the same in that sump pump ball, your dog thinks his ball's in there. Right. And so he's going nuts, and he associates you with the basement, which is why he didn't go nuts for us. Anyway, I think we're going to try to create a Team Tucker brand. We've got the logo. We're going to do some merch, and we're going to donate proceeds to animal rescue.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I think what we're going to do is now curate content, and anybody out there that has a favorite dog shelter that they want to contribute to, or they like, it's in their neighborhood. What we want to do is have people send us, like, I want to showcase like shelter of the month, like a shelter showcase that shelter. And then every day or a couple times a week or a few times a week, give us dogs. Show us who's available for adoption in your facility. And let's see if we can't pair them up with forever homes. And then if we sell content through the store, we'll deliver proceeds over to support animal shelters.
That's really cool. It's amazing.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, it's amazing how one video and these new algorithms can send you down a path that you never really thought you'd go down.
I've had a blast. I got to tell you, I've been having a blast. I've put out probably 30 pieces of content on that channel. There's just updates and radon tests, and we strung it along like a little mystery, right? We did cool. Every week was a different theme, and I've had a really good time doing it. So I don't really want to let it go, but I also got to remember that I have another business.
Yeah. And Scott, before I end every conversation, I ask my guests if they have a question for me.
Yeah. First off, Thank you for having me on today. I've enjoyed this conversation. I guess my question for you is there anything that we've discussed here today that resonated with you that you're going to take back now and apply into your life?
Yeah, well, a lot. I feel like I consume a lot of the content that you consume, and I share many of the thoughts and values with you. Um, but I feel like I haven't turned it up to 100.
Hmm.
I feel like I'm not taking as many risks as I could and should.
Yeah. Hmm.
And it's a good reminder. This conversation for me has been a good reminder about burning boats, and I need to do it more because I'm at a point now where I'm pretty confident in my abilities and capabilities, and so um, I need to burn the boats and sort of take that leap because I know
Yeah.
something good will come from it.
100%. Yeah. So I'm glad that you took that away. I think you're younger than me. I'm sure you are, much younger than me. And so you've got time, but it looks like you're on the right path. And congratulations on giving up the drinking as well. I think that's a huge feather in your cap and give you that competitive advantage. But yeah, I've enjoyed this very much. So this is great.
Awesome. So have I. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah.
I too
Thank you.
enjoyed this conversation. If people want to find out more about you and Drone Legends, where can they do so?
So you can visit dronelegends.com to learn about what that program is. You can email me at scott@dronelegends.com if you have any questions. It doesn't have to be about the business. It can be about anything that we've talked about today. As you can tell, I could talk about this stuff forever. So you can just email me at Scott, SCOTT, at Drone Legends. If you're curious about Tucker, you can go to TikTok and you can go to Team Tucker Tales, Tales. So Team Tucker Tales, and you can watch the original video and see what we're doing there. You can connect with me there as well. So kind of two ends. If you're inspired, you want to have questions about business or books that I've read, I'm happy to share my kind of bibliography with you. That's at scott@dronelegends.com. If you're into dogs or animal rescue and you want to contribute there, or you have an idea of what we can maybe do with the channel there, because I could use some ideas, Team Tucker Tales, Tales, and hit me up there and tell me what you'd like to see up there as well.
Great. Thanks, Scott.
Awesome, man. Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. One more quick reminder before you go. I have a weekly newsletter by the same name, Another Excuse, where I cover 4 topics: something that has changed my perception, a tool that could be useful to you, content that is actually worth consuming, and a concept that I try break down and explain. If this sounds of any interest to you and you need a kick up the arse, then you can subscribe at the link below. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next week.